Interesting.
putting it is that the right hemisphere is our anchor in reality. It's actually looking at what we're experiencing right now and enabling us to understand it in all its complexity, whereas the left hemisphere is giving us just a theoretical take on a certain kind of a situation.
Mm-hmm. So is it reasonable to, so a bunch of thoughts have been going through my mind, and part of this is that you need a brain if you start to move. And if you start to move and interact with the world, then you have the problem of the part versus the whole.
That's it.
And you talked about the bird that has to distinguish something very specific.
Let's back up. You start to move, you need a brain. And then later in this video, he talks about the sun moving across the sky and then looking at the sun as a living thing because it moves across the sky. It's just, if your language, our thoughts are the words that we speak, and then the words that we speak turn into actions, and then the actions get labeled as behavior becomes character, and then character becomes destiny, which is where a lot of the adults, my elders, are at. You know, they've reached pretty much like their destiny. Like, I have my, you know, my doctor, I got several books, I'm renownedly respected. And yet I hear videos where you just open up like, I'm in so much pain. And that kills me, Dr. Peterson, because I don't know. My left hemisphere is that like a physical pain? Something that you've been just, you know, like I just tuned in. I've been following you for like 2 years now. I haven't, you know, I see like two pains, like, because if it's emotional and physical, that's one thing. But if it's just this emotional struggle that the brain can essentially just throw down on the body, essentially, if we're going to go by this model where it's just, okay, the left is the one that is just spitting nonsense, you know, but then why do you go to that for your daily bread? That doesn't make sense. That's just ironic right there to say, don't listen to your left. It just blah, 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 blah. But you go to it for your daily bread. Do you get what I'm saying? And then you just, like I said, the moving, it's just back up. And then
A seed against a background, let's say, of pebbles, but the same bird having to be concerned about the broader context for the presence of predators, for example. And so the problem is while you're focused on something.
And again, this is where Dr. Ian contradicted himself too. He said there's two types of attention or something like that, where food, and then he talks about the bird going in for the gravel, and then he says when it gets to that point, you got to worry about, you know, get it swiftly, accurately, and before anybody. So that's three things on top of the, you know, like, so that's already another contradiction. There's two kinds of attention that we all need to be able to pay. How we get food, if the enemy sometimes of a bird picking up a seed, grits, gravel. Okay, so that's just the background of grits and gravel. So he's just, you know, like, this is where, did he really just only explain one type of attention here? You know, I'm only at 636. But again, right there, it's just, I hear there's two kinds of attention. And then I hear, okay, food. Okay, yeah, just going in. And then, yeah, when you're going in for food, you have to be swift, accurate, and you have to be faster than everybody else. It's just, but then that works for a while. Then you talk about how the bird just starts focusing on that. Oh, hey, there's the seed. Boom. because now the inferior, the one that was trying to catch the bird but couldn't because it was too swift, and it got there before, the predator could get it. So now the predator is thinking back in its cave or wherever the predator of this bird in this thought experiments at goes back and is just like, you know what? I got some seeds over here. And he just puts a seed out. Just, just imagine an animal. You said an animal has a brain, it moves. So it's just, it sees the seed. Oh, okay. It recognizes this. It doesn't see any birds. So then maybe it just waits, doesn't see anything. And then maybe it's just like, I don't know. And then it just like walks away and then it turns around and then the bird gets it. And he's like, oh. And then the animal goes back. Just like, next time I see a seed, I'm going to pick it up and take it. And then I'm going to, it's just these steps that I take when I'm chalking out my plan, trying to map out like how I'm going to go about this, because I do this whole fantasy. Like, what if we did this? What if Adam just said, hey, I'm sorry, God. I just ate an apple that the woman gave me. It's all my fault. Punish me. I think that maybe Eve would have been like, no, God, I gave him the apple, I should, and then, the serpent doesn't ever talk, but it get to the point where how did all of a sudden the serpent get introduced by, we're just talking, and then all of a sudden when she's getting blamed and trapped in a corner, now it's the serpent deceived me. All the serpent did was tell you the truth. You eat this, you're gonna know the difference between good and evil. Adam is clearly not good for, just he knew. A man and a woman leave the parents to be joined as one. Well, Adam just, threw Eve under the bus. And so, yeah, Eve just reciprocated that back onto the serpent. And all the serpent did was tell him truth. What if the tree of life, not what if, I know the tree of life and the tree of good and evil, the knowledge of good and evil is the same tree. Life to the animals, knowledge and wisdom and all this stuff to man. That's the difference.
Of the human heart, when it's given faith, if it were opened up, it would blind the world. May this message give us eyes with which to see, ears with which to hear, and hearts with which to love each other, to love the world, and to do good.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Charles Payne and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else. Okay, that's a high standard
to
compare
it to. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered.
First step in solving any problem is recognizing there is one.
Pay strict attention to what I say, because I choose my words carefully and I never repeat myself. I've told you my name. That's the who. The where could most readily be described as a prison cell. But there's a vast difference between being stuck in a tiny cell and being in prison. The what is easy. That's also the when. As for the why, it's exceedingly simple. Because I can. Which leaves us only with the how. And therein, as the bard would tell us, lies the rub.
This is where I'd love to know if she held those sources accountable, because we saw the email from the DOJ saying that we swept up the passports. There were 2 that were expired, 1 that was active. They were diplomatic passports, which are given to you in government, par for the course, being the President of the United States. But to me, this speaks to kind of the indiscriminate nature of this search.
Remember, technically, your passports are the property of the United States government.
Yes.
Think of it as a privilege, not a right. But certainly other personal property, absolutely, it's seized by the government and will remain in such for years. I've had clients that are still trying to get their stuff back. Cheryl, you're...
And this argument that's being proffered, that these are diplomatic passports, they can be seized by the government at any time, that's what we call a red herring. Look over here, because the point is the government returned the passports within a week. So the government did not mean or intend to take those passports. I will say, interesting, 9.5 hours to rifle through 11 boxes. You had a dozen agents to rifle through the 11 boxes you took. At no point did 12 people searching for nearly 10 hours come across the passports and say, oh, we should leave those here.
And to Kaylee's point, so Trump's spokesperson, Taylor Budovich, said, this is how fake news works, folks.
He will say interesting Wall Street Journal piece about Merrick Garland, about how he's a cautious person, how his demeanor as a federal judge is something that he has shed over time. And they write that even with routine matters such as requesting help from foreign governments, he would review in detail these documents that normally you would delegate. And I would just love to know, at what point did he turn from a cautious attorney general who reviewed documents that should have been delegated to an unprecedented raid on a former president? I'd love to know the calculation in his mind. I'd love to know if there were any objections, because I've got to think one person said, hey, this might look political. We need to have a really good reason. We'll wait for the facts to come out, but the bottom line, he should give those documents to Rubio and Warner. And I applaud Democrat Senator Warner for saying, I need to see the documents. So thank you for that bipartisan call. I think America echoes that.
That's right. And Harris, this is how fake news works. As Trump's spokesperson said, it's up to the remaining good people within these institutions to expose the bad actors and hold them accountable. The only surprise to me is that it is happening or has happened to a former president. So the American people have a lot more questions that will hopefully be answered soon. Folks, because that level of encroachment and that level of lack of specificity, the level of like, oh, we grabbed this too, oh, sorry, here it is. This is how fake news works, folks. I mean, I have a million stories of heartbreaking encroachments into average American people. And I think that the people asking now, well, then this is going to happen to us next. It's already happening on a micro and macro scale, frankly.
What if you don't get all
your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, what is going on at the FBI? I keep going back to the chaos of this raid, and you know, I know that they've denied that this is a political operation, but we've once again politicized a government agency.
Americans are feeling, which is why are these false narratives being amplified so quickly? Is it for the clickbait? Is it to be first to the gate? But then you just have to backtrack
and it's a shame to me what's happened to what I think was once a great organization, a great piece of the U.S. government. And this raid has just, I think, shown that they really just don't know what they're doing. And I think that's one of the reasons they don't want the affidavit released, because they're using it, oh, it's national security, oh, we have to protect the witnesses. I think it's because, once again, like we found out with Russiagate, there's not going to be a there. And I think that's what they're more worried about than anything. And yes, I read the PE.
He went on to say this is a perfect example of how the vital institutions of media and justice are being destroyed from within by the lazy, the corrupt, and the ill intent. Now,
there's not going to be a there. And I think that's what they're more worried about than anything. And yes, I read the PE.
And I would just love to know, at what point did he turn from a cautious attorney general who reviewed documents that should have been delegated to an unprecedented raid on a former president?
Admit that you're wrong for all of our detriment as we wait for the facts.
Hey, this might look political. We need to have a really good reason. We'll wait for the facts to come out, but the bottom line, he should give those documents to Rubio and Warner. I'd love to know the calculation in his mind, and I applaud Democrat Senator Warner for saying, I need to see the documents. So thank you for that bipartisan call. I think America echoes that.
That's right. And Harris, in all of those questions, it also includes sort of how the media is shaping this. Said the Biden administration actively feeds half-truths and lies that the media willingly amplifies,
that allows
advancing
an
a
official to keep
partisan
them.
narrative
Apparently
to
was still in
attack
place.
Trump.
But maybe they just scooped all this stuff up. They were told to just get whatever you can. That's why we need to see the affidavit. Because if the affidavit said get whatever you can, Katie barred the door for the rest of America. Because that means they can come to your house and get whatever they can. You have to have specificity in order on that affidavit to get the warrant. And I only know that because one of my close friends, Emily, and my other close friend. I want to touch on something. Kaylee, you're both attorneys. It really speaks to the issue. The other part that I'll just say very quickly with all of this is so you send in your FBI the accountability is so rich where it's coming from. The calls from accountability now are coming from the man who was just raided. His home, not from the federal government. Why is that?
Great question. Tim, we are so grateful that you are back with us today. What do you make of
the passport issue? Might be
it's kind of heartbreaking. I love the rule of law. I love that this country is a nation of laws. But for laws to be real, those laws have to be impartially executed evenly and fairly across, not race specific, not gender specific, and definitely not party specific. When we start doing that, we lose any moral high ground that we've ever had, and especially in the international community, when people are looking in, we're supposed to be this shining light of truth and justice, right? That's what America is. That's what we stand for. We'll climb cliffs, we'll run up the beaches to fight what's wrong. And when we're doing that in an unfair way, it sets a dangerous precedent. And party specifics, where it's a partisan attempt to grab some power, it's very dangerous, and it's bad for the way that the rest of the world looks at America.
It is dangerous, and I think, I have to confess I feel a bit jaded with my background as a criminal attorney, because to me, I'm not surprised at all. The only surprise to me is that it is happening or has happened to a former president, because that level of encroachment and that level of lack of specificity, the level of oh, we grabbed this too, oh, sorry, here it is. I mean, I have a million stories of heartbreaking encroachments into average American people, and I think that the people asking now, well, then this is going to happen to us next. It's already happening on a micro and macro scale.
What if you don't get all your stuff back? Impartially.
There have been cases from years ago that you still that people still don't have their
not race specific, not gender specific.
All the time, the government.
Not party specific.
Yes.
When we start doing that, we lose any moral high ground that we've ever had, and especially in the international community, when people are looking in, we're supposed to be the shining light of truth and justice, right? That's what America
that happens
is. That's
all the time. And remember, technically, your passports are the property of the United States government. You have to give it as a privilege, not a right. But certainly, other personal property, absolutely, it's seized by the government and will remain in such for years. I've had clients that are still trying to get their stuff back. Cheryl, your thoughts on this?
Well, attempt to grab some power, it's very dangerous, and it's bad for the way that the rest of the world looks at America.
Of this raid,
that's his words,
and I know that they've denied that this is a political operation, that
we see what the investigation uncovers and how the government proceeds with that information, their conclusions. The FBI and the DOJ, frankly, are filled with good men and women doing amazing things and acting honorably every day.
And this raid is just, I think, shown that they really just don't know what they're doing, and I think that's one of the reasons they don't want the affidavit released, because they're using it. Oh, it's national security. Oh, we have to protect the witnesses. I think it's because, once again, like we found out with Russiagate, there's not going to be a there, and I think that's what they're more worried about than anything. And yes, I read Merrick Garland gave all this thoughtful time and and really contemplated. It's too difficult. That raid was not carried out by an agency that gave it careful time and contemplation. It was chaos, and I think it's going to.
All the time.
We're not going to get anything out of it again. You really want to criminally charge a former president? You really want to go down that road?
Well,
it's frightening to me.
We will absolutely see what the investigation uncovers and how the government proceeds with that information, their conclusions. The FBI and the DOJ, frankly, are filled with good men and women doing amazing things and acting honorably every day. But as Trump's spokesperson said, it's up to the remaining good people within these institutions to expose the bad actors and hold them accountable. So the American people have a lot more questions that will hopefully be answered soon. Hey everyone, I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget...